This is football. I am Kevin Clark. Monday night, thought I'd have a better game. We had one good wildcard game. One. Wasn't the one tonight. I'm going to do a whole reaction to that. That's coming up in a second. I just want to quickly, because I haven't done it anywhere else, talked about the Cowboys opening. Came down on Monday morning. Coach Prime is now a candidate. What I love about the Cowboys opening, and this is just sort of prototypical Cowboys, you haven't been around it. Like, there's nothing like the Cowboys. They're constantly, everybody in the organization is constantly giving press conferences. Ownership is talking before the coach does. And what I liked and appreciated tonight is that Deion Sanders immediately commented on the report, just picked up the phone, that he might be a candidate. And it was, I'm not really sure I came away with any more answers having read the comment. He basically said he loves Boulder. He loves Jerry. He's always going to talk to Jerry, but he loves Boulder. Not a denial, not a hey, I'm going to pursue this Cowboys job, not a hey, I'm going to stay in Boulder. Just I love Boulder. I don't know what that means. And frankly, none of us should, because it's the Cowboys coaching search. And one of the things, and there were so many conspiracy theories out there today saying, ooh, maybe the Cowboys are doing this. The reason the Cowboys have an opening on January 13th and not 2 weeks ago is because they're weird and disorganized, and they leave things to the last second. And they always think that the market is going to work itself out or go down or whatever, but they leave things to the last second in a way that 31 other teams, maybe the Bengals do as well, but that's a different type of delay and kicking the can down the road. They're one of one, and they're the only team that would be in the situation. I say this all the time. Take the team name off, just describe the situation. You're going to guess Cowboys. That's the situation here. Mike McCarthy is going to become, I'm not a huge Mike McCarthy fan if you listen to the show, but he's going to become a top candidate with a place like New Orleans, with a place like Chicago, because there are franchises, he can get you to 10, 11, 12 wins. There are franchises that would kill for that, right? Like, it's the same reason like the Bears have never had a 4,000-yard passer. You can accidentally throw for 4,000 yards in this league now. The Bears have never done it. And if the Bears can get stability at the quarterback position, consistent double-digit wins, they will sign up for that all the time. The Cowboys are under a different set of expectations, but they still would have taken what Mike McCarthy provided them had it sounds like the contract had been worked out. Sounds like McCarthy wanted more job security, whatever. But now you go to, is Coach Prime the guy? Is Jason Witten the guy? Is Kellen Moore the guy? A couple Cowboys reporters basically like, Jerry's never going to pay a buyout. So just forget about Sark and Lincoln Riley and even maybe Coach Prime, who would have a buyout. But I think the overarching thing is the Cowboys are weird. And so, by the way, it's a good job. I don't want anyone to be confused, but it's a very good job. Dak Prescott's a very good quarterback. They give you talent. I think the biggest problem is in the hiring process. And then the second biggest problem, they might hire somebody weird. And the second biggest problem is they don't maximize the roster. And there are certain things they do contractually, kind of like they do with the coaches, where it costs them 2 or 3 good players per year because of the way they handle their business. Again, they're one of one in that regard. So I don't know what they're going to do because they're weird. Everybody else, there was a funny line about the Giants a couple years ago when they brought in Dable and Shane. Everybody knew they were going to bring in Dable and Shane. And someone involved in the league said, this is going to be just out of central casting. This search is just going to be out of central casting. And what they meant by that was it's going to be the number 2 at a good team, and then the number 2 at a good team's OC or DC. That's it. It's going to be the most vanilla Main Street search you've ever seen in your entire life. And the Cowboys are the exact opposite of that. I have no idea what's going to happen here. Would Coach Prime work? Probably not. But I love Coach Prime at the collegiate level. And I was such a huge advocate, check the tweets, of him going to Colorado, because that job, they badly needed juice. They badly needed recruits. Colorado had been irrelevant for 3 decades. And the only way to get that would be someone like a Coach Prime. Colorado does not have a lot of enough high school talent, and the guys that are there don't stay. So you need a national recruiter, and that was only going to be Coach Prime. Does that work at the pro level? I haven't seen enough to say, okay, this is going to work. I think it's a different deal in college. I have not seen enough schematic advantage, prep, whatever you want to call it, at the college level. I think he's worked. I don't think he gets enough credit for what he's done at Colorado. He's worked football miracles in some cases. But when I look at that team, I say they win because they have really good players, because they have Travis Hunter and Shadur Sanders and Jordan Seaton and those guys, and they're getting 4 and 5 stars and getting guys like Cormani McLean, who never played, now at UF on a walk-on deal. But like, they're getting those types of guys, and then they're able, with a handful of NFL guys, to win the Big 12. That's all. Or I'm sorry, win the Big 12. They could win the Big 12 with that type of model. They didn't, obviously. They didn't even play in the championship game. But you can compete for the Big 12 with a handful of NFL guys. And that's what Deion Sanders is showing. But to get a handful of NFL guys to Boulder, Colorado in the Big 12 in the Power 2 era is amazing. And the success he had instantly was amazing. If Kirby Smart went to Boulder, it would take him longer to get those style of players than Deion Sanders. Okay, but that rant over. Point being is that he's great in college, and I haven't seen anything other than, and first of all, this is 95% of college football. Roster acquisition and roster management is his best trait. Being able to do the portal year over year, all that stuff. It's awesome. It doesn't work in the NFL. It doesn't matter. It doesn't work like that. And by the way, Jerry Jones is the GM. So roster talent acquisition is a non-starter there. You don't even need to be good at it, because Jerry Jones is going to do his thing. So I don't understand why that would work necessarily. Now it would solve one of Jerry Jones's problems, which he needs to be in the headlines every single day. Coach Prime and Jerry Jones will get you there, but he does probably want something beyond that. So I am so impressed with what Prime has done in Colorado in just 2 years. I just don't see it as a fit. Don't see it as a fit. All right, let's talk about this game. So I'm going to do winners and losers real quick here, because I don't know what the hell was that. I mean, like, what the hell was that game? I was watching the Manning cast. I love those guys, and they made the correct decision, which is just start, talking about a bunch of other stuff instead of just describing the same Sam Darnold hit over and over and over again. Peyton Manning did an amazing rant about how offensive lineman gifts need to come out of your own pocket and they don't need to be sponsored. I agree, by the way. I saw that, and the most aggravating thing about it was people being like, oh, well, Joe Burrow gave this, Patrick Mahomes gave this. You sure they did? Or was it like the, Ford of rural Kansas City giving out, F-150s. I don't even know what they gave out, but I'm just saying, like, a lot of this stuff is sponsored now. And so the idea that like, he went out of his way and got him a Rolex, like, no. Like, normally it used to be like, we got you, $100 off at Ruth's Chris. We got you some Omaha steaks. Now no pun intended. Now it's like, well, we got you, we got you ATVs. Okay. Huh. All right, good. I love that rant. All right. So anyway, the game was over very quickly. I saw something. I'm going to read you a bunch of stats, and I don't necessarily love doing that, but this game can be told through numbers. I'm going to get into the context of it. But I did see a stat that first half of this game, it got better statistically, but just barely. The first half of this game for Darnold was worse than the Seeing Ghost game, which is as bad as it gets. That was like the low point. That is literally shorthand for bad quarterback play in this era. Like, what happens when you fail a young quarterback? He says he's seeing ghosts. Well, guess what? Sam Darnold, mid-career, on the verge of getting franchise tagged, has a worse game against the Los Angeles Rams. So I want to do winners and losers. I'm going to start here with the first winner. And that's the Los Angeles Rams organization starting, I'm going to shout him out, Les Snead and Kevin Demoff and the guys who put this roster together. Sean McVay being included in that. Because there were so many ways that, so first of all, I mean, like, let's start here. This Rams defense is young, inexpensive, fast, and ferocious. I mean, just over and over and over again. Sam Darnold was pressured 23 times in this game. That's the most a quarterback has faced. This is via ESPN. Most pressure since Patrick Mahomes took 29 in the Super Bowl. If you remember that game, the Mahomes-Brady game in the Super Bowl was the biggest disparity in pressures, I believe, in the history of football. Because Brady didn't take any pressures and Mahomes took 29. It was astounding. And by the way, guess what the Chiefs had to do? They had to overhaul their entire offensive line because they were just too injured. Maybe Mitchell Schwartz had that back injury. He was out. I think Eric Fisher was out. They just had a bunch of guys. Mike Remmers was out there playing like a left tackle. I literally, that game was so bad. I don't mean to be mean, but I think I went on Simmons pod like the next day and I just talked about Mike Remmers for a while. And there were other guys who were just as bad, but I literally got like a DM from someone being like, Mike Remmers is a great family man, lay off him. I'm like, all right, we don't need to do the family man thing. Okay, man. That's how bad that game was. It was like hey man, I know this guy you're making fun of. He's a family man. Okay, pal. Like that's when you know you played poorly. Is you got the family man DMs coming in. Anyway, I feel bad. I feel bad for saying that, but it happened. All right. So, and by the way, I could have gotten all five of the Chiefs offensive linemen that day because I gave it to them all. So 7 is via Kevin Seifert. 7 of these sacks, and this was right before the game ended. It may have been more, but at least 7 of the sacks came from 4-man rushes. And I'm going to get into what that means on the quarterback side. But what the Rams been able to do, so I'm going to go to the Jordan Rodriguez thing that she said on the show a couple months ago, which is that in aggregate, they wanted to replace Aaron Donald, who's irreplaceable. He can't do it. So you take an aggregate, it's like the Moneyball scene, take Braden Fisk and Jared Verse and that chemistry that they had. They played together for 1 year at Florida State. Jared Verse played 2 years at Florida State. He was at Albany before that. Braden Fisk was at Western Michigan, I want to say. Might be Central Michigan. Don't quote me on that. I believe it was Western. But they played 1 year together at Florida State, and they had a chemistry. And what I thought was so impressive is that they knew when it was time to pin their ears back and get the quarterback, because when Jordan Travis went out, they looked around and said, nobody's scoring on our offense. We might as well go out and make it so that Florida and Louisville can't score a point. And obviously I'm being facetious, but it wasn't much more than that. The Louisville quarterback in the ACC title game was as uncomfortable as any human being on the planet because of those two guys. Bad day to be a Louisville quarterback. I think his name may have been Jack Plummer. I feel like he got a cup of coffee this year in the NFL. Probably shouldn't have. But Sam Darnold sacked 6 times in the first half. First time that's happened since the 1988 NFC Championship game, in which the Washington team beat Minnesota. So there you go. Cam Kitchens, how about this? 12 different Rams generated a pressure. First time that's happened for that team in 4 years. Kobe Turner, unbelievable night for him. Got to shout him out. Linebackers played well. They just knew how to handle things, and they knew what to do. And Sam Darnold is regressing. I'm going to get to him in just 1 second, but I don't think you can tell the story of Sam Darnold without the story of the Rams, but then I don't think you can tell the story about the Rams without talent acquisition. Again, the players, I'm always going to default. When I do these winners and losers things, I'm usually going to default to something on the roster first, whether it's how the coach did it or whatever, because the players matter far more than anything else. And it starts there. And again, I did this rant 2 nights ago about the Ravens and the Steelers. The reason the Steelers looked like they were quitting or not putting in any effort or whatever is because the Ravens had a bunch more better players than they did. And that's how that looks. That's what sometimes we ascribe to effort what is actually talent. And getting, manhandled, getting the crap knocked out of you, getting pushed back. I promise you, the Steelers were trying to not get pushed off the ball. Oops. And that's what happened here with the Rams. First loser, Sam Darnold. So I mentioned the pressure stuff already. Here's part of the problem. This was not all his fault. Part of it was offensive line, but he did hold on to the ball a lot. Tackles are getting blown off the ball, as I said. Talking about the talent thing earlier, like the Rams were just a more talented front than the Vikings were. We saw that over and over and over again. Sam Darnold now, the one thing I don't want to jump on is that people are saying, well, Sam Darnold cost himself a ton of money. So I guess my question is, where was that money going to come from? Was it going to come from the Vikings in the form of a mega contract and they were going to trade JJ McCarthy? I don't think that was going to happen. Was he going to get tagged and traded and then get a huge extension elsewhere? That could be a possibility. Was he going to play on the tag next year? Well, they figured out what to do with JJ McCarthy. That's a possibility. I still think he's going to be in the realm, whether or not Minnesota tags him or not. I'm sure they'll figure out the trade ramifications and what the market is. They're not going to tag him if they don't want him to play next year and they get stuck with a $40 million bill. That would be bad. But I still look at the quarterback market, guys. Look at it. Look how many crappy, awful players get a ton of money because they're breathing and they can throw the ball down the field. You think Sam Darnold, you think teams are going to turn their nose up at Sam Darnold? You think he's going to sign another 10? He got $10 million this year. You think he's going to sign 2 years, $10 million somewhere? No. He's going to make a bunch of money because, again, it goes back to the Mike McCarthy thing. If teams would kill to be, I heard a great line from PFT commenter. Now I'm merging 3 different things right now. I'm going to land the plane. I'm going to land the plane here. PFT commenter said something in the middle of the season that made me laugh, and I actually thought about it today. Everybody was calling the Commanders frauds. He's a Commanders fan. He said, "Do you know how great it is to be labeled a fraud? Like it is a privilege to be labeled a fraud because it means you're doing something. You know, it's not labeled a fraud. 2-9 teams. No one's like they're a fraudulent 2-9 team. They should be a 1-win team. No, it means you're a 14-win team. It means you're a 12-win team. It means you're 8-1. Whatever it is, that's when you're fraudulent." And that's what you're labeled fraudulent, right? It's great. It's great to be labeled a fraud because it means you're doing something right. And there are teams who aspire to be labeled frauds. Aspire. And again, it goes back to what I was saying with Mike McCarthy, to land this plane. Mike McCarthy has a ceiling. Man, teams will kill for that floor. Teams will kill for that floor. And I don't think tonight, one bad game over the season shows Darnold's floor. I think it's higher than that. I thought they should have tagged and traded him already. I was not a JJ. I was a JJ McCarthy truther. I thought that he could have played this year and given you a huge percentage of what Darnold gave you. But I'm just saying this rush to say he cost himself so much money. Oh man, he might not be a starter next year. Look at the quarterback market, guys. What would have happened this time last year if Sam Darnold was coming off this season and the Raiders were looking at Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell? What would have happened there? Antonio Pierce may have saved his job if that happened. May have saved his job. Think about that. Think about the amount of, how much money Nick Foles got years ago, 2 years after he won the Super Bowl. Think about all that stuff. Like, there's just, it's a supply and demand thing. And the idea that 2 bad games, by the way, I saw an amazing stat, Kevin Seifert had it, that this was the most off-target throws Darnold has had in a game this year, except for the last game. So he literally hit his nadir at the exact worst time. His most inaccurate weeks were the 2 biggest games of the season. But anyway, all this to say is like, Darnold is going to get paid. He's not nearly as good as people were making him out to be, but he's not nearly as bad as people were making him out tonight. He's going to be fine. He's going to be starting in this league. He's going to make a bunch of money. The vibes in the locker room a couple weeks ago, probably never had that again in Minnesota. The dances, all that stuff. But again, being labeled a fraud is a privilege. They were a fraud, but they won 14 games. I think a lot of teams would kill for that problem. All right, winner. Trying to think of winner. Am I on winners or losers? Winner number 2, Matthew Stafford. So Matthew Stafford carved up the blitz. 70% of dropbacks he was blitzed on. He completes his first 9 passes, I believe. Was only pressured once. On the night, 14 of 18, 178 yards, 2 touchdowns against the blitz. The Vikings pressured Stafford on just 34% of those dropbacks, which means a couple things. Number 1 is the blitzes weren't getting home. They weren't being that effective. Number 2 is Matthew Stafford was just getting the ball out. Bang, 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 bang. Puka, Cup, tight ends. Like, it was awesome. And that's why you have Matthew Stafford. One of the toughest guys of his generation. He'll hang out there. Like Jared Allen was in the Manning cast. He'll hang in there because he has such a big arm and wants to go downfield. He will hang in there, but he can also just do the quick game stuff. He sees the field so well. There's a reason the Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay were trying to get him a couple years ago when they're both in Cabo. It's because he would have changed their franchise. And I'm looking here at a Stafford who has won a Super Bowl, could win a Super Bowl again. Like the thing that's driven me nuts over the past few years is the idea that the Lions won the Jared Goff Matthew Stafford trade. They both made out in amazing ways. But the Rams have already won a Super Bowl, and they might win another Super Bowl. I think a couple of years ago when the Rams had to take a step back because of cap stuff, which, by the way, like I always thought the strategy that got them in cap hell was the FM picks strategy, which I think people misunderstood. They were still hitting on draft picks at a really alarmingly high rate. They were hitting on Puka. They were hitting on Cooper Kupp. They were hitting on all of these guys. It was just that they were trading first round picks for veterans because that made more sense. Now they're going back and not to do this again, but like Verse, Fisk, like they're back into the first and second rounds and they're crushing it. People misunderstood the FM picks strategy. Anyway, not important. But when it looked like the Rams were going to be in the doldrums for a couple of years, it became trendy to be like, the Lions are going to win that trade. Yeah, first of all, the Rams are good with the trade because they got the ultimate prize. And the second thing is, Matthew Stafford, it's not the end of his career. He's got a couple more years left. Jeremy Fowler was saying maybe contractually this could be the end of the road. By the way, they're about to play in an NFC that could be a little weaker than we thought. A little weaker. Not to sound like a CFP, sound like I'm giving a college football breakdown here, but like there are 3 teams in the AFC, I think, that are a huge cut above any team in the NFC. I think the NFC teams are bunched together significantly more than we give it credit for. And I think the Rams can beat the Eagles. I think the Rams can beat the Lions. I think anything can happen in the NFC. I don't think anything happened in the AFC. I don't think the Chiefs are going to lose to the Texans. But there are 3 teams in the AFC that, like, again, it sounds like I'm doing the college football thing about strength of schedule and all that stuff. I kind of am. But this is all to say the Rams can make the Super Bowl. Absolutely. Can't win it, can make it. Loser number 2, I feel so bad. I feel so bad. I don't even want to say this. It's Vikings fans, it's Minnesota sports fans. So I was on the radio yesterday with Justin Pugh, and I was watching the Nixon fumbled kickoff. And it reminded me, I was kind of young, and so I didn't remember everything about it. It reminded me of the Giants Vikings NFC title game in 2000, which I hadn't watched since that day. Remember, and I don't remember the particulars of it, but the particulars of it were Kerry Collins scores a touchdown like the 5th play of the first drive. The Vikings fumble the kickoff. Kerry Collins scores on the very next play down the field. It's 14-0. I think 3 minutes into the game, 41-0 final. And by the way, Giant Stadium was just rocking. And as someone who's been in MetLife, it felt like a foreign country. I've never been to a Giants game that looked like that. Not even close. There's only been one Giants home game since, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 2011 game against the Falcons. Again, I might fact check me on that, but I think there's only been 2 playoff games in the history of MetLife. And one of them was the Broncos Seahawks Super Bowl. But anyway, so I put it on Twitter and I was like, hey guys, what's the loudest a crowd has ever been? And like in the last, since 2000, because I was thinking about that crowd was insane. It was insane before the game, and then the roof comes off the place, the proverbial roof comes off the place, and then it's 60 minutes just partying because you're going to a Super Bowl. By the way, that Super Bowl, I was there. Drove down from good old Orlando. But so many of these things so many of the moments that were allowed were at the expense of the Vikings. People were telling me Patrick Robinson's pick 6 against the Vikings with the Eagles, the Brett Favre interception, like so many awful Vikings moments have been like great moments and watershed moments for other teams. And it makes me feel so bad. And at least you have the Minnesota Miracle. At least you have that. I have a funny story about that. So when I did Slow News Day, the first athlete, and it's so funny now because it seems like so long ago, just from a logistical standpoint, but the first athlete who ever came on Slow News Day was Case Keenum, right after the Minnesota Miracle. And he said that, so we were talking about different experiences that he's had since the Minnesota Miracle. So it had been like 2 weeks since then, 2.5 weeks since then. And he had said, the most common thing is people telling me like where they were. And I told him this story because I'd read this quote one time from a Tottenham Hotspur player who basically said that anytime someone comes up to him, they start telling a story and he thinks it's about a goal or something, but really the story is about themselves, right? And which is great, but it's about like, oh, my friend spilled a drink on me as this was happening, like, or I took it was my first date and I married the woman, whatever. And so we're talking about this, and then the episode ends, and there's like this line. We're in Minnesota. There's a line of like 10 guys who want to tell Case Keenum, thank you. And all of them were telling them exactly where they were and where they were seated and why they knew, because they were sitting on this edge of the couch that it was going to happen. And it was so funny to see the personal connection everybody made to that play. Anyway, I'm glad you guys had that, because every other moment has been awful. And it makes me so sad. And this is another one, like it just ends with the whimper. That's the thing that hurts me so much, sort of vicariously, is that it tends to end with a whimper, or it tends to end with Gary Anderson missing a kick and all that stuff. But like so many of these things, I always compare it to like the end of the way. If you've not seen The Departed, I don't know what you're doing, but please just skip ahead 30 seconds. Reminds me of the way that the elevator scene in The Departed, where it's like, oh wait, he's dead now. What? And like that's Viking seasons. Is like, wait, hold on, we're building something. How did this happen? Why is it over? We're building something. We're supposed to go to the Super Bowl. We won 14 games. We're supposed to go to the NFC Championship game. We're supposed to see this team more. And it just ends. And you just go, what, that was it? That was the season? That's what I've invested? Now it's cold in Minnesota? That's what I've invested all this time for? It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. Winner 3. Let me give it to Sean McVay. Rested his starters. Everybody questioning it. And people, the belt was kind of going to Kyle Shanahan. I did something the day after the Super Bowl where that the 49ers lost to the Chiefs, the one in Miami, so 2020. I put on Twitter, I said, who would you rather have as a coach, Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan? And it was like 80% Kyle Shanahan. And this is, remember, the year before, I think McVay had lost Super Bowl. Next year, the Rams win it, or 2 years later, the Rams win it, and I say, put out the same question. And it's like 80% McVay. And I did it just as an exercise to see how fickle we are about this stuff. But if I know I sound like bring up a straw man here, but like McVay somehow has become boring in best coach conversations, but he's still, as a culture builder, and like Andrew was on the show a year ago, saying that, when he took over, here he is, 31 years old, or whatever the hell he was. He spent all of OTAs just talking about culture. And it's so easy for guys to tune you out on that. But he was so good at it, they said, we're buying in. That is a really dangerous thing to do, because again, if you aren't amazing at it, veterans will tune you out. And McVay nailed it. And now he's got the plays. Now he's got the roster. Now he's got young guys who's bought in. Like the journey he's had as a coach has been amazing. He didn't quit. There were all sorts of rumors about that a couple years ago. If you remember, he thought about it, didn't do it. Everybody thought he had one foot out the door. Everybody thought he was going to a TV. Everybody, and I've heard like 8 different versions of the TV story at this point. But the point is, he stayed. He stuck through it. He changed the way he operates, and he's great now. He's great. And the Rams are as good an organization as in the NFL. Sean McVay is a winner tonight. And if somehow, for whatever reason, you've stopped giving him top of mind billing in these best coach conversations, I think I don't even need to say anything, because I think you've changed. I think you've changed your mind. Loser 3, real quick. Vikings defense. Belichick on the Manning cast said it. Struggle with in cuts all year. Deep routes over the middle. There were a bunch of stats, like there were deep guys who went deep who were wide open. Like kind of a lot, because of how much they blitz. Like that's just the way it goes. You're going to give up open guys because you're bringing pressure. The point is the pressure has to get home. Quarterback has to not see it. He has to be seeing ghosts. And then the free guy doesn't matter. Problem is, on a night like tonight, the blitz doesn't get home. Matthew Stafford's too smart for this stuff. Doesn't work. And I think Flores probably takes a hit as far as a as far as a head coaching candidate. We'll see how that goes. I mean, I'm always wrong on this stuff. Like, Kevin Stefanski was a great coach. I remember him getting heat because it wasn't his last game with the Vikings. May have been that playoff loss in San Francisco, and everybody was making fun of him. And like McVay, his last game with Washington was all bad. Like sometimes the last game these guys play doesn't really mean anything. Like it's not an audition. Like owners are typically looking at a body of work. So we'll see how that develops. But for me, with the Vikings defense, this was at some point bound to happen. Again, it's a little bit of the conversation earlier where it's like they set a standard that was so high relative to the talent, relative to what they were doing all season long, relative to what another coach would have done. They set a standard. It wasn't truly based on, 11 of the best defenders in football, right? It was a bunch of scheme. It was a bunch of just stuff they were able, exotic blitzes, putting quarterbacks in hell. I felt like that was bound at some point. The Bills were going to come due on that. That was tonight. But it doesn't mean that like Andrew Van Ginkel didn't have an awesome season. Blake Cashman didn't have an awesome season. Like they were really good. And we'll see what they do in free agency. I saw Harrison Smith's a free agent. It was listed on the Adam Schefter does a helpful thing where he lists everybody's a free agent. Darnold was first, Smith was second. We'll see if they remake that. I think this is a really interesting team, especially with JJ McCarthy next year, assuming they go to him. Offensive line, I don't know what you do there because they were getting bullied tonight. I still think I think Kevin O'Connell's going to figure this out. I have faith in him. But this was the Rams night tonight. Again, I feel so bad for Minnesota sports fans. They deserve something better. Again, they deserved a better ending, even if it wasn't a Super Bowl. Give them something. Give them a dignified playoff loss. This was just bleh. This was just, I can't believe on a cold Monday night, things are over again. I feel so bad. All right, Tuesday, we got two great guests. One episode will come out Tuesday, one episode will come out Wednesday. I don't want to tease who they are. They're both going to have good comments in the Cowboys. One is going to have unbelievable comments in the Cowboys. You'll know it when you see it. Thank you, Flynn. Thank you, Miles. See you Tuesday. Thank you to everybody on the ESPN YouTube page for getting this one up. See you tomorrow.